It's a big Friday planned here on the College Football Show. Appreciate you stopping by here at the Voice of College Football. We always cherish your time, our time together. Leave your comments and questions there in the chat. We've got a number of great topics, a excellent guest coming up this hour. And of course, if you would like to see us go beyond 1 hour, there is an opportunity for overtime, as the famed Dan Patrick once said. This is a call-in show. If we have not made that very clear to you, you can see it there right above me. Call-in show here at the Voice of College Football. It's Monday through Friday, 10 a.m. Eastern time. So right after all the conference media days, we committed to a 10 a.m. Eastern time slot, Monday through Friday, ending when? Well, certainly not until the championship game is played on January 20th. So we will be here every Monday through Friday, 10 a.m. Eastern time, all the way through the national championship game. And guess what? I'll even show up the next day to wrap up the national championship game, even though we will probably do post-game that will last deep into the night. All right. Amazon links in the description section of all the videos. When you shop Amazon, please use our link. It does not cost you a penny. It's the one way you can contribute here to the Voice of College Football without spending a penny. Does not change your shopping experience. And the month of August here at the Voice of College Football for our daily call-in show, brought to you by our good buddy and partner, Chris Gates Fitness and his training camp initiative. You care about football, care about your body. So we will tell you more about that coming up. At some point in this show, this is now 15 editions, we will get to show names. We will clear up the final result on these show names. We started to take care of that, I believe, on Thursday. Then we got a couple of calls and never got to the show names. So we will display the show names. And I collected 21 names. I know that there were more like 50 to 60 entries, but people left those in the comments section of the chat, not the comment section of the video. So they are gone, goodbye. So if you want to make a last-ditch effort and a selection of a show name for us, the winner of the show name contest will be receiving some gear here at the Voice of College Football. So your item of choice, regardless of price, on the merchandise store here at the Voice of College Football. Spoiler alert, there was a competition between our team here at the Voice of College Football. So we got a number of selections that were brought to us by the many hosts and various content creators that we have here on the various team channels. Then there were the selections by you, of course. And then I also had my input on this one. So we will announce a show name, final show name. If you follow us on X, you're probably getting a decent indicator of what that show name could be. And of course, follow us on X. They have booted me from my personal account, and we have made that the official home, the official X account of the Voice of College Football. Ratings, rankings, analysis, discussion, engagement with you all the time. Please follow us on X. We will hopefully have time to get to one of my favorite exercises that we started on Thursday, which is, of course, the plus or minus 3. If you're not aware of that, every season there's about 20 teams out of the Power 70 teams that have a substantial increase or decrease in wins from the previous season. A substantially different team, different results by at least 3. So this is a Voice of College Football created metric, and it is meaningful because we tend to have groupthink and we tend to be conservative and look at last year's results and basically tweak the results by 1 or 2 games, except for if there's a Deion Sanders going to Colorado type situation. Other than that, we pretty much play it close to the vest. But history has shown us over the last 7 or 8 years, I have tracked this, that usually there's 18 to 22 teams that have a plus or minus 3 from one season to the next Last season, it was 26. On Thursday, we went through the Big 12 and the ACC, and I came up with a number of teams in which there was a substantial plus or minus 3 or more from the previous season. And then we made our projections toward 2024 and what we're going to see this season. So, for example, in the ACC, we came up with help from you, Florida State. So 12-0 would have to become 9-3. Louisville, 10-2 last year. Does that become 7-5? Virginia Tech, 6-6. We're going to go the upside with the Hokies, 6-6. Does that become 9-3? Miami, this is a clear candidate for many. I saw a prediction out there from Greg McElroy. I believe Greg McElroy said Miami's going to go 11-1. Or was I told that? I saw Greg McElroy give some analysis on Miami and basically say, this team, I saw a clip of Greg McElroy on Colin Cowherd where he was basically saying, best quarterback in the ACC, best skill position players in the ACC, best offensive line in the ACC. They loaded up on the defensive front. Really, this team has everything except for a proven secondary, and they have partially addressed that. So does Miami go from 7-5 to 10-2? And like we talked about yesterday, if we're talking about personnel, roster, too deep, best quarterback, Miami is the clear selection in the ACC. However, Dabo Swinney, Mike Norvell versus Mario Cristobal. I know who I trust. Mario Cristobal, to me, right now is a marginal average football coach. He is an average head coach who is a tremendous recruiter. So when you put it all together, maybe he's a 6.5 on a scale of 1 to 10. He's a 4, 4.5 as a game manager, game preparation. Yeah, Georgia Tech, that was a 0. That was a 0, of course. But when you put it all together, to be fair to him, more like a 4, 4.5, 5 as a game manager, game preparer of the team, getting them ready, game adjustments, all of that. That's probably being kind on my part. But recruiter, 9. Okay. Pitt, 3-9 last year, 6-6 this year. That is not my prediction. Early next week, we'll have a big prediction blowout. We may do that on the 10 a.m. show. Maybe we'll do a night live stream on Monday or Tuesday, but we will do it early next week, a prediction show. So be locked in. Please subscribe and hit the bell for the notifications to know when we are going live with that show and every show. And I kind of like Virginia, 3-9 to 6-6. That's a possibility. Again, not necessarily what I'm predicting. SMU, 10-2, but that was a group of 5 schedule, except for 2 teams, 10-2 last year, down to 7-5. So we will get to the plus or minus 3 concerning the Big Ten and those teams coming in from the Pac-12 and, of course, the SEC a little bit later. We've got Leanne Herring, who's going to join us later in the hour from the Rebel Walk to talk Ole Miss football. There is another CFP prediction out there, this one courtesy CBS Sports. I wanted to go through that for one reason in particular. And that is basically not just who's going to make the playoff, but what conferences are going to be represented in the playoff. And this is an entry from, I apologize, it's a particular writer, but their name is not listed here. I think this is connected to an article. So I saw his name. I don't want to mispronounce it or misstate it because I don't remember his name. I had not been familiar with his work before, but this is courtesy CBS Sports. So this particular writer likes Georgia, Ohio State, Utah, and Florida State. That's pretty much of a chalk top four seeds, conference champions right there. I would like to be able to envision something else happening besides that, whether that's Texas or Bama in the SEC. I would be surprised. Maybe Ole Miss is obviously a selection. They're a top 6 team in the preseason polls. Ohio State's going to get challenged by Oregon, Michigan. Those would be the two that come to mind. I would be a bit surprised if Penn State could elevate all the way to a Big Ten championship, or Iowa, although Iowa's got the kind of schedule they could sneak into a championship game, and then who knows? They are 60 minutes away from pulling off a major, major upset bid. Utah in the Big 12, they are the prohibitive favorite, although Oklahoma State and Kansas State are considered. I like Iowa State to be a bit of a dark horse challenger in the Big 12. And again, we will do our prediction show next week. Florida State in the ACC. Again, I served up Miami. Florida State is the betting odds favorite according to Vegas, but it's extremely close between FSU, Clemson, and Miami. And let's switch from our CFP projections here. And let's bring in Leanne Herring from the Rebel Walk.
Good morning, Mark. How are you?
Morning. I'm doing well. How are you?
Doing good here in Georgia, getting ready to kick off a little bit of recruiting on the road against number 6 Milton, against number 21 Buford tonight. It's going to be a big game in the state of Georgia, and on national picture we have I believe it's 19 seniors between both teams that are committed to Division I schools. I believe that's the most in Georgia program history in the state of Georgia since 2014 when it was Roswell against Grayson. So there's going to be a lot of A-list commits. We do have an Ole Miss commit, a tight end, Hayden Bradley, is going to be on the Buford side of the ball. And of course, looking for some up-and-comers from the 26 and 27 class as well on both sides of the ball. So really excited to kick off tonight here in Georgia.
So, folks, if you follow Leanne on Twitter/X, you're going to see the term "crouton" all over the place. And that's a term I didn't come across until, I started to cover Ole Miss, Mississippi State, and Alabama back around 2000 when I came down to Mississippi and started covering college football. And I crouton all over the place. Okay.
All over the place. No, it's really a term that I love, and I just think I think it's just fun because it's a nonstop game. I got here yesterday afternoon, and kind of looking at the scope, looking at players, always looking at films. It's a nonstop game. But like I said, exciting game tonight in Georgia to open up the season. As far as the national picture, there's a lot. As much as I love to cover Ole Miss in college football, I'm glad to be back on the road because it really does start here with the high school football coaches and the high school athletes out here on the road. There's a lot of great talent, and always looking to see new faces and names that you may not know.
And Leanne, I just have to say, I marvel at the commitment of the recruiting analysis that you do because Kirby Smart famously said here in recent years, recruiting never stops. It's 24/7, 365. It's all the time. You've got to be committed to it. It's a grind. But on the media side of things, you are showing that kind of commitment. You're locked in on Fridays with high school football. Then you got to switch gears on Saturday. And I believe you even dive into the NFL on Sunday as well.
Do. I think that, I'm also a mom too of 2 boys and 2 girls. And I think that when I became a mom and that switch, it kind of helped me balance. But, as long as I've been in media my background actually started working when I was at Brown. I went from being a cheerleader to working in the athletic department, and I was an equipment manager. And that's kind of where it started. So I was inside of the program, learning how to do filming, learning from some of the best coaches in the Ivy League. And I think that was really the time where I knew that if I ever got on this side of the board and becoming in media, that I would treat it a lot different because, with recruiting, it's 24/7, as we know with NIL, and it's just a different age. But I always say that I want to treat these families, I want to treat these kids that I meet, regardless if they come to Ole Miss, I want to treat them like if my boys or my girls were getting recruited. So I try to make them like family. I have a lot of kids that I've helped work with that aren't on Ole Miss rosters, even though that I wish that they were, but it's exciting to see them, play at Kentucky and a few other places. So it's really a rewarding experience. And that's kind of my approach to it. I want to share their story because I think a lot of times we don't get to see that access. And a lot of our fans in the SEC don't get to see the access of all the commitment, because if you think about it, these are a lot of young kids not only balancing their football commitments, but also balancing their home life as well as their academic life. So it's a lot when you think about it at 15 and 16. Were we doing that at that age, especially on this kind of stage? And when now with the age of recruiting, it's changed so much. Like I said, NIL has played such a big factor, and it's trying to keep up with the Joneses on overdrive all the time, but I enjoy it.
So, Leanne, in regards to the game you're covering tonight and scouting for tonight, any particular players that you're looking at, and what are their connections and their offers and possible commitments at this point?
Well, I think a lot of the highlight, as far as like we said, on both sides of the ball, of course, you have a young team that Coach Ben Reeves has done a fantastic job over at Milton last year, winning the state championship after him making the transition to head coach. There's a lot of talented players on that. I think the big story has been Luke Nickel coming back, returning. He's a Miami commit. Ole Miss was going after him. CJ Wiley, another really talented receiver. They're committed, but again, I'll be looking at some of the guys over on both sides of the ball. I really never go into a weekend, a Friday night game. I like to look at all the players because, you just never know. And I think that this is the first game of the season, so this is really where we see. And yes, while some of these players committed, as we know in recruiting, if there's a really talented player, you really never stop recruiting them. So I think that's kind of how I go into each weekend, each mine. There's a lot of talented players hoping, it may not work out at where they're committed and we can get them back at Ole Miss and, or help them get into it to another university. Like I said, this is a really talented group on both sides of the ball, which isn't expected because Georgia, like Texas and some other powerhouse states, produce such great talent year in and year out.
Absolutely. It's amazing the meteoric rise of Georgia high school football in the last decade or two. The state has basically supplanted California as the number 3 state in recruiting in terms of the depth of blue chip players. As it pertains to Ole Miss, what is the recruiting landscape look like right now? Are there any targets out there that people should be looking out for?
There's always targets every time. I think right now we, of course, with fall camp starting a few weeks ago, and the focus with Ole Miss Center, where Ole Miss stands as far as the college football play of all the pressure. I think that's really been the focus. But I think some key players, of course, that Lane Kiffin will continue to commit, of course, is in-state wide receiver Caleb Cunningham, who was hoping to come to Ole Miss, is committed. I think he will still be a heavy target. I think that the Rebels will also go back against Keelan Russell. He's one that we watched a long time. He's a very talented quarterback out of Duncanville who was committed to SMU. He was also being recruited by us, but he is also committed to Alabama. And when that commitment happened, he pretty much brought a lot of talented receivers and a lot of offensive players. But I think right now in the game of recruiting, I always say it's a long way to December. So I think that right now the Rebels will continue to recruit, like I said, in-state players like Caleb Cunningham, LaDarian Clardy, Ty Mims. Those are kids that haven't made decisions yet, but are pending posts. LaDarian Clardy is really another talented safety that was supposed to commit in early August, but has taken a trip since then to Washington and some other places. He's been one of the Rebels' top targets. He's pushed back his commitment. So I think right now the focus will be on, as far as the recruiting scape, is trying to get those players in-house. And I think a lot of the players, despite taking official visits as far as the 2025 class is concerned, they're waiting to see how the season starts and how the dynamic, even though they've been there many of times, I think it's different going into your senior year. Also going into the way Ole Miss is going into the season. Not that they haven't been in this position before, but this year it really seems like Ole Miss has put itself, Lane Kiffin has put himself in a legitimate position to make the long haul. And I think a lot of these players are really waiting to see if this is going to happen, if this is going to translate on the field. And I think once we start getting the season rolling, we're going to see a lot of recruits see that this is a for real team and that it's translating on the field. And I think that that's going to make it a lot easier for them to possibly come to Oxford.
We got Leanne Herring on the line from the Rebel Walk. Please check out her work right there, and you can see her X handle, and you can follow everything that she's got going Monday, Friday, or Saturday, and Sunday. High school, college, the NFL with Leanne right there. Let's get to the 2024 Rebels. They're about halfway through fall camp right now. Before we dive into the football, I got to ask you about this. This is not my thing. People love gossip. They love situations like this. They say that the quarterback gets the pretty girls. I haven't really tracked that myself, but based on this situation, so Jackson Dart and his girlfriend, some type of falling out. I'm not going to take sides. I'm not even going to believe what's out there because I have no idea. But just in terms of the the Ole Miss fan base and how they've responded to this. This has become just a story that has just gone beyond viral.
No doubt. Like I said, when you brought it up and we were talking about it, previous to the show, I really haven't paid much attention to it. But
Good for you.
it's funny. Like I said, gossip in media. But like you hear all our football staff say at Ole Miss a lot of time. Keep the main thing the main thing. And I think, despite what all the rumors that are going on between Jackson Dart and his off-field issues, it really doesn't seem to have affected him, because if you see him in fall camp, we have some of our Rebel Walk staff out there who's been there daily, and it's really exciting to see the focus. And I think that Lane Kiffin and his staff have really put them in a better position as far as having to handle the hype. Like I said, the expectation has been so high and the bar has been set so high that we know that there's going to be a lot of gossip, a lot of rat poison, as we like to hear. So I think that this group, especially Jackson Dart in the position that he's in, he seems more focused than ever. Not that he wasn't before, but I really have seen the team, as far as on an overall scope, when you talk to players, when you talk to coaches, that they're having to handle and approach the situation a lot different. So, but this is also the same media bunch that reported that he had an ACL torn, which we all, off season, which we all knew was not true and didn't happen. So like I said, I'm keeping the main thing on the main thing when it comes to Jackson Dart. But from what I can see and from what we've been reporting and over at the Rebel Walk from our guys that have been out there covering practice daily, Jackson Dart, along with the wide receiving core and that depth that he has, it doesn't seem like it's shaking him too much.
And Leanne, just to give you my take on the approach in terms of what I do every couple of days, Ole Miss football news, just to see, okay, what's out there, what's going on, what's the latest, that sort of thing. And we had prepared to do this segment, and that was late last night. I typed that in, and I'm like, this is all I see on here. Can I get some football news? Okay, we'll go with this. The running back room is loaded. Of course, on the national scene, people are focused on Quinshon Judkins is gone, but that's old news. Ulysses Bentley and Henry Parrish, of course, a guy that's come back to Ole Miss from Miami, and Logan Diggs is an experienced guy who's been at LSU. And now I'm seeing that Matt Jones is making a splash in camp, that he might be able to work his way into the running back room. Just your thoughts about all the weapons on offense.
Oh, it's ridiculous how many weapons, and it's, of course, like Lane mentioned during SEC media days, when we lost Quinshon, that for if any team that he was on, he's an impact player. We saw it day in and day out. But again, in true Lane Kiffin fashion, we got to focus and play the cards what we're dealt. And I think that's the one thing about Lane Kiffin and his staff. The way he set things up, he's running his program like an NFL program, to be quite honest. And I think that the depth and development that he's creating with every player, where he's brought such balance to the Ole Miss offense. And I think what's been really interesting to see, and I think is going to be a successful element in how they play and how they translate into the upcoming season, is that he's been able to take players at the running back position and several other positions, been plug and play guys. And we're not talking just about finding a great athlete from a transfer portal, from your veterans, from your young guys. He's developing all the teams in such a way, and all his athletes in such a way, where he's getting such a balance and a mix and production from every different category, from transfers, from veterans, from young guys, where he can keep it fresh. And I think that that's going to be an interesting and also a big proponent in how he plays the season. And I just think that a lot of players that we don't hear a lot about, you can only tell so much for fall camp. So I always tell people, it's not until that first Saturday during kickoff, when you see the guys get in full pads, when you see them going up against somebody who's not their brother, as I call it, in a fall practice kind of setting, and the adrenaline, you can really understand and see. But I think what Lane Kiffin has done, and along with his coaching staff, you got to applaud him, how he's running that program, but the depth that he's created, and more so the balance at every position. And, you have to talk about the defensive side of the ball and that defensive front. Lane mentioned it, coming off the bus, that, he recruited off this offseason, finding length and size, and he's definitely found it. That has been my take at fall camp, is that defensive front is going to be something dangerous. And I think it is much needed for this Rebel offense for this Rebel defense to be successful. And, Jared Ivey is at 285. Now that I think he's going to have such a phenomenal year. Putting on that extra weight now allows the Ole Miss defense to be able to plug and play him as in the inside, in the outside. There's just a lot of players. TJ, he started out as TJ Dudley, that transfer from Clemson last year, but now he's going by, I believe it's his mother's maiden name, TJ Daughtry. He's been a really interesting player to watch, going from the scout team, not being eligible, but I think he's going to be a great complement at the linebacker position with transfer Chris Paul, of course, from last year. I think that those two are, some names that we've seen out of fall camp that have just really been productive, and I think are going to be a great complement. So I think there's a lot of players, not just one set of players, that are really having an impact this season and have just made the commitment to put on weight. You can tell that they've been working hard this offseason, and I think we're going to see it the first couple Saturdays going in. But that defensive front has been exciting to watch at camp.
No, it's a great point, and I'm glad you hit on it because nobody has questioned Lane Kiffin's ability to dial it up, obviously, and he has built a tremendous culture there at Ole Miss, and the skill position players are stout. They are among the best in the nation, but this team is worn out in 4 quarters against the likes of Alabama and others, and that defensive front's going to be key, and we hear good things about Jamarian Brown as well as Xavier Harris on that defensive front, so Ole Miss looking to take that step in the trenches. You mentioned coming out and getting hit for the first time in anger, not by a brother, and that's going to happen against Furman in week 1. Well, if you look at those first 4 games, obviously the coaches and players take them seriously, but there doesn't seem to be a whole lot of resistance. What are you looking for that first month of the season before things get really down and dirty in the SEC in regards to this, the development of this team?
I think, those first 4 games, especially in the SEC, they've been called cupcake games. They've been called, the starter games and everything. But I think that with Ole Miss and the focus this season is that every game is important, no matter whether you're playing Furman or whether you're playing Georgia at home. Every game is important because you're going to have, with the schedule and the way that the development is going with them, and you mentioned it, is can Ole Miss, even though they have the depth, even though they have the talent and the skill set, can they make it through 4 full quarters of football without losing gas on the break? And I think that that's going to be this test. And I think that we're going to see a lot of those first 4 weeks. I feel like they're going to use a lot of their experienced players, but much like the NFL preseason, I wouldn't be surprised if Lane Kiffin uses some of his younger guys, use some of his transfers that maybe he hasn't really seen as far as with this program in the field to see and kind of feel it out and see how it goes, to see what kind of players he can use, because I feel like the depth that we have this season is going to be tremendous. But we also have to understand that while some of these transfers have played at other stages, they haven't quite played on a stage like Ole Miss and in the SEC. So I feel like the first couple weeks are going to be important and focused, but it will be a lot of much similar to the NFL preseason, seeing a lot of familiar faces and unfamiliar faces, kind of to see where things stand and how Lane is and his staff is going to utilize certain players that we may not know a lot about, but could be impact players other than the names that we talk about, like Jordan Watkins on offense, Trey Harris and other. Don't be surprised if you see a lot of young guys also step up to the plate and get some playing time just to kind of see where they stand.
Leanne, before we let you go, we got a comment coming in from Cody Clearman, who is saying, can't wait to experience the Grove. So I have covered about 15 or 20 Ole Miss games at Vaught Hemingway, but I was with the media. I had to prepare for the game. I never got to experience the Grove. So you got to give us a taste of the Grove. I've been in that same situation. I always say, everyone always wants to invite me to the Grove and come in, and I always make it. I'm kind of a superstitious, traditional kind of person, so I always do make a pre-walk through the Grove. But I know that I can't stay long because the tailgating, the fun, and I was talking about this yesterday on a show that I did on the way coming into Atlanta. What I love about the Grove is, of course, you have your chandeliers, you have all your signature Ole Miss hottie toddy elements. But what I also love is just that so many people come in that are not necessarily Rebel fans that come to experience the tailgate, because I'm talking, people and families that have been doing this for a long time. They have their traditions. The travel spreads are phenomenal. So if you thought that, if you ever get hungry in the media press box and you can sneak your way over there, you're probably going to get some great food and some great things. I just think that the tradition, the love, and the energy. But I think when a place is doing it right, when you have fans that are Texas fans, Tennessee fans, it may not necessarily be Ole Miss fans, and come just to the games to enjoy it, because I just think it's
it's just a once in a lifetime experience. And there's just so many different people from so many different walks of life that for a couple hours on Saturday are breaking bread and just like a family. And that's what I love. Like you said, you mentioned earlier about Lane Kiffin and the culture. And I think he's really brought it out in so many ways, the culture as far as, not just the family on the football field, but the family and the culture outside the football field in Oxford.
Folks, lock in on the Rebel Walk. Ole Miss Evie has been so good to us here at the Voice of College Football for such a long time, and the entire staff there. And follow Leanne there. It's Leanne Herring. You see her X platform and where you can find her right there. Leanne, thank you so much for stopping by. Great to see you, and have a great time tonight covering high school football and on through the weekend.
Thank you. I'm super excited. Thanks, Mark, for having me and all these hotty toddy.
Great stuff from Leanne. And again, Ole Miss Evie at the Rebel Walk. We thank Evie, and she's been a tremendous support to us here at the Voice of College Football. All right. We have left the call-in line in the chat. We probably need to do it again. It's probably buried at this point. It's also on our post on X. And we will get back to our conversation concerning the SEC versus the Big Ten in the college football playoff. Who gets more teams in the playoff? Can't type and talk at the same time. That's a skill I've never been able to put together. Talking in and of itself, difficult enough. All right. We do appreciate you being here at the Voice of College Football. We guarantee you an hour, Monday through Friday at 10 a.m. Eastern Time, through the college football playoff, through the championship game to the day after. I believe that's a Tuesday, January 21st. We'll be here every Monday through Friday, 10 a.m. Eastern Time. And 1 hour action-packed, my rants, great guests, your takes, calls, comments, questions, and we will go over time with your contributions and support. So we appreciate that so much. All right, let's get back to these bowl. I was going to say bowl projections, because that was actually the second conversation we were going to have, because this particular writer at CBS Sports, and again, I apologize that I cannot give them due credit, but the other link had the writer's name, but this grid with his playoff and bowl selections does not. So we went through his 4 conference championships and the bye weeks. After that, we've got Texas as the 2 seed in the SEC, and we have talked about this all offseason, ever since this format was unveiled, that, okay, the number 2 team in the SEC or the Big Ten is going to be in a prime spot, because sure, they don't get a bye, but they're going to be playing a 12 seed at home to start out the playoffs. So they are in a great position from there. Then on top of that, say Texas takes care of business at home against Boise State. Then who do they play? Well, they play the winner, or they play Florida State, of course, who's waiting with the bye. So you are playing the worst team in the field by far as the 5 seed. Then you are playing the worst of the conference champions, who is, you can almost bet, will not be the 4th best team in the country. They will be the 10th best team in the country, the 12th best team, the 13th best team in the country. So the 5 spot, if you cannot get a bye, that is the spot to take. If you're, let's say, the 2 seed, as is the projection here with Ohio State, if you're the 2 seed, then sure, you sit for a week, but then you play the 7 seed, or you play the winner of the 7-10 game. In this case, you would expect Alabama to emerge against Miami, and you're playing a much better team. Probably, not completely discounting the Big 12 and the ACC, probably playing a much more difficult game as the 2 or 3 seed, or maybe even the 1 seed, which would be playing the 8-9 winner, Texas A&M and Penn State. So there's a curious choice there. I am not going to criticize that choice because this is not going to turn out to be chalk. We talked about it the other day. We produced a video. Hopefully you've checked it out where we've looked at the top 10, the past 3 seasons, the preseason selections by the AP, where in 2022, 5 of those teams did not make the top 10. They did not even stay ranked. And the same thing in 2021. Now, last year, everybody stayed close to the top 10, excluding USC, preseason number 6. So there will be surprises. I don't know who that's going to be. If that's going to be, of course, I'm going to make predictions, and we're going to have our big prediction show early next week. But that could be Iowa State out of the Big 12. That could be Ole Miss out of the SEC. That could be NC State emerging from the ACC. So again, the CBS sports writer likes 4 teams from the SEC. Georgia, then Texas, then Alabama, then Texas A&M. If you were going to be given a 4th team out of the SEC, I'm guessing most of you would say Ole Miss. Many would say Tennessee. And then, of course, LSU would be another selection. But he really likes Texas A&M. So that's a 10-2 record right there. Texas A&M 10-2. 10-2 out of the SEC is going to get you there. However, if you really grind this down, the models have shown us, as we've taken you through the years of the college football playoff and the 10-year sequence of the 4-team playoff and how that would have played out as a 12-team model, a 10-2 team always makes it. If you're a power team, you go 10-2, you're going to make the college football playoff. However, this gives us reservation here. I guess it would be difficult to have a 5th team in the SEC be 10-2 or a 4th team in the Big Ten be 10-2 because they've got 3 teams from the Big Ten. Ohio State, Oregon is the 2 seed in the Big Ten, and then Penn State making it. Michigan does not. That's his choice. Again, in this scenario, if these teams are as good as we expect them to be, I see a great advantage to Texas being the 5 seed, playing Boise State and then Florida State at a neutral site after they play Boise State at home. You know, compare that to Oregon, who's going to be playing as just 1 seed lower. They're going to play Kansas State and then Utah. Or take Alabama, just 2 seeds lower than Texas. Let's say Texas and Alabama, who do not play, are both 10-2, but Texas is given the 5 seed and Alabama the 7 seed by whatever measurement, just because they may have been more impressive against Georgia or had a better win in there somewhere. That Texas is given the 5 seed and Alabama the 7, but they're both 10-2. That road for Alabama in the first 2 rounds is Miami and Ohio State. For Texas, it's Boise State and Florida State. Much different from the 5 to the 7 seed. Would love to hear from you guys. Mike3883 likes NC State to make the playoffs. I have produced videos, and I have called them a dark horse. They did go 9-3 last year. So this is a really good program that Dave Doran has put together. And there are no elite teams, I do not believe, in the ACC. So I think the odds are stacked against them pretty heavily, but I'll give them a 15 or 20% chance of making the ACC championship game. Vandy Dandy says Tennessee's going to be 2-2 after week 4. Well, that's telling me that they're playing somebody tough. Let's look at Tennessee's schedule because I'm trying to think who their big non-conference game is, and I can't come up with it off the top of my head. And they must be playing somebody difficult in week 4. Oh, that's why Vandy Dandy brought this up. That's right. Forgot about this game. This is a nice little matchup. Not a whole lot of people are talking about this one in terms of non-conference game for a couple different reasons. Number one, we're focused on week one. Number two, NC State doesn't typically draw a significant bit of talk around college football. People are talking about USC and LSU, Clemson and Georgia, Texas A&M, Notre Dame, and all those week one, and even into week two, talking about Texas, Michigan, and such. But NC State playing closer to home in Charlotte against Tennessee. I don't know what the proximities of that's got to be much closer for NC State, but not. I don't necessarily consider that home field advantage. That's not like Georgia playing in Atlanta, but still NC State playing a semi-home game at Bank America Stadium, home of the Panthers against Tennessee. Night game, week two. Love it. Love these kind of matchups. Yes, that could be a good one right there. And then, of course, they go to Oklahoma. So this is what Vandy Dandy's talking about. Tennessee possibly being 2-2. It would be my guess that they're going to win one of those two games and be 3-1. That's what the probabilities tell us. They, of course, could win both of those games. They could lose both of those games. They will be 2-2 at worst. They could be 4-0. And then it sets up well. If they are 4-0, then I see Arkansas and I see Florida. Certainly they could lose to Florida, but it is a home game. They lost to the Gators. They got crushed by the Gators last year. They would go to Alabama at 6-0. They would have Alabama coming in for the first time to Neyland Stadium since that 52-49 epic game 2 seasons ago, and they would be hosting the Tide at 6-0. And then the hype train would be out of control surrounding Nico and the Vols. Yes, Dave, the only one outside the chalk was Texas A&M. Pretty much. It's kind of a toss-up if you believe in the media involving Penn State and Michigan. For me, I trust Michigan far more than Penn State at this point. I think from a talent perspective, it's a close call. And, of course, we've got a veteran quarterback at Penn State in Drew Aller. So that's a reasonable call either way. But I would tend to lean Michigan over Penn State. And again, I'll unveil my predictions next week. Mike says, I trust Tennessee's defense versus OU's offense. Also, Nico handled Iowa's defense. I think it's a mismatch. Mismatch. I don't know if it's a mismatch. Folks, we would love to go to overtime. That's based on your contributions to get us to the goal line and continue this show throughout the day. Most days I've cleared out, 3, 4, 5 hours for this show. If you would like us to go for that amount of time. That's pretty much all I had with the college football playoff projections there. It was more to me about the SEC with 4 bids, the Big Ten with 3. We have sized that up recently, and my thought is that the SEC is better than the Big Ten. The SEC is still better than the Big Ten, but not as significant as it was just a year ago or 2 years ago and before that. And that the elite of the Big Ten are really going to have to be on their game, because after Ohio State and Michigan, after those 3, or after those 2, Penn State's got to prove it. USC's got to prove it. Oregon even has to prove it on a big stage. And so it's going to be fascinating going forward, the Big Ten against the SEC. The Big Ten right now, to me, is deeper and has more candidates to be elite. Has more candidates. So the Big Ten has certainly an opportunity to keep up with the SEC and even surpass the SEC and win more national championships with what Michigan did last year, with what Michigan could do again this year. Ohio State, Oregon, they would be the three teams that I would say I would not be surprised if any one of those three teams won the national championship. Out of the SEC, I would not be surprised if Georgia, Bama, or Texas won the national championship. I would be surprised if Ole Miss won the national championship. I think Ole Miss is an extremely talented team. We just talked Ole Miss. And if they went deep into the playoff, that would not surprise me. But winning 3 to 4 games in the playoff, I would be a bit surprised with Ole Miss doing that as things stand right now. Now, going into the playoff, they may prove to be a juggernaut, and I would change my perspective. But as we sit here in August, those 6 teams, and I really would be surprised if anybody else won the national championship. I would be somewhat surprised. I do not see Clemson or Florida State or Miami or Kansas State, Oklahoma State, Utah. Put Notre Dame in that place. And I know that they've had injuries and people overreact to injuries, and they are significant. I'm not saying that they're not significant. It doesn't cause some depth concerns and drop off from a first team offensive lineman to a sixth guy. All of those things are credible, but Notre Dame would not surprise me in winning a national championship. Those are the 7 teams that I would say, yeah, wouldn't be surprised. Ohio State, Michigan, Oregon, Notre Dame, Alabama, Texas, Georgia. Next tier that I would be less surprised, but I would say, yeah, that really was not a team that I thought could make the complete run back in August, but would be the next tier of teams. The next tier would be Florida State, Clemson, Miami, Ole Miss, Tennessee, Texas A&M, Utah, Penn State. Yeah. And then going to another level beyond that, like a third level of, wow, that would be something else. That would just be incredible. But since they can certainly get into the playoff, then they can win the whole thing. They'd be 3 games away if they win their conference. I will put on that third level USC, Iowa, Kansas State, Oklahoma State, Iowa State. Did I mention LSU? Were they on the second tier? I don't think so. LSU to me is one of the biggest wild cards in the country. The biggest wild cards in the country, 2 of them are playing each other in week 1, and that's LSU and USC. I think I've got a pretty good hold on everyone else. I've got a pretty good lock on where everybody else stands. And I'm going to be wrong. I'm not saying that all my predictions are going to be right, but things are going to have to break a certain way for teams to deviate from where I think they'll land. But will be less surprised about an elevation or a drop. I think there is more wild card factor with USC, LSU, Texas A&M. Then we've got a couple teams on the fringe of the ACC, NC State, Virginia Tech, Louisville, that could cause some noise. NC State would get most of my love in that direction. Now, CBS Sports actually did something that used to be important to college football fans. They went beyond the playoffs and they did bowl games. They're actually going to play bowl games this year. Do any of these games interest any of you? If this writer, and again, I apologize for not knowing the writer's name because it's not listed here. It's in some article, but these are his projections for bowl games as well. Do any of these bowl games, if these teams turn out to be what you expect them to be, and yes, LSU does have a killer offensive line. I have questions about their secondary and who's going to carry the football. And Sportmark is asking me if there are going to be any undefeated teams this year. I would say no. Okay, we had 3 last year in the regular season. Of course, there can only be one for the entire season. That's the potential there. There can only be one. There could have been 2 last year if Florida State beat Georgia. So there can only be one for the entire season. But if you're talking about the regular season, I don't even think the regular season is going to produce one undefeated team. Ohio State's schedule is too tough. They could do it. I'm going to give them a 15 or 20% chance of doing it. Georgia, man, they've got 3 extremely difficult road games and Clemson. I don't think it's going to happen. However, I will say this. One of the logical assumptions to make, and we had 3 undefeated teams in the regular season last year, of course, Michigan, Washington, Florida State, is that what makes it more difficult now is the consolidation of these teams into conferences, because you've taken the best teams in the Pac-12 generally, and you've moved them in 2 directions, mostly to the Big Ten and then Utah to the Big 12. So you've consolidated the best, and you've taken Oklahoma and Texas and moved them to the SEC. So you have increased the difficulty substantially. You've just increased the difficulty of these schedules substantially. Find us on X. Jackson, thank you so much for dropping the link there. Please follow us on X. This is no longer my personal account. This is our official Voice of College Football account with ratings and analysis and top 10s and rankings and all sorts of good stuff for you to respond to and engage in there at the Voice of College Football on X, and also the Amazon links in the description section of all the videos. I cannot express this enough that if you would just use our Amazon link, you would support us tremendously. And using this link does absolutely nothing to your shopping experience. It is exactly the same. Amazon knows it's you. I've tested this out with friends, with family members, not just one time, like a dozen times, just to make sure this is not screwing up with your account or not recognizing you or anything like that. Nope. It instantaneously, they're smart people at Amazon. You can say one thing for these big tech companies. We could say a lot of negative things, but the one positive thing we could say is they're loaded with smart people. And so it's instantaneous. You use the Amazon link that we provide, you are contributing not all your money to a $2 trillion company. You're saving $5, $6, $7 for the Voice of College Football. So please use the Amazon link. It's in the description section, and it's also posted by Jackson there. So we appreciate Jackson posting the Amazon link. Ralph has his 12-team playoff. And again, we're going to do a big prediction special, whether it's during this time slot next week, or we may take it to prime time, a big prediction show early next week with, of course, Florida State and Georgia Tech. And SMU and Nevada also play on week 0 Saturday. Ralph says Georgia's the 1 seed, Oregon the 2 as Big Ten champion, Miami 3 as the ACC champion, and Arizona minus Jed Fish, minus Jonah Coleman, but plus Brent Brennan. They kept Noah Fafita, their best receiver, their best defensive player, and then he likes Ohio State as the 5, taking on Liberty. So that G5 spot appears to be between Liberty, Boise State. Memphis is getting some love. And then he's got a nice little 8-9 game between Bama, Penn State. I like that. Michigan, Ole Miss at 7-10. Notre Dame, Texas, 6-11. The ACC and the Big 12 only get one team, causing 16-team talk. Yeah, especially if those teams do well. That'll cause even more. If Miami, which would have to play the winner of Notre Dame, Texas, gets steamrolled by 3 touchdowns, and Arizona, which would have to play Ohio State, gets steamrolled by 3 or 4 touchdowns, then you're not necessarily going to hear much talk about the ACC and the Big 12 needing more teams in, or a 16-team expanded field. The talk is going to be, well, those 2 conferences suck, and why did they get top 4 seeds? Because, man, I could see that. I could see Miami lining up against Texas, and I'm not saying that the talent gap is much. I could just see it happening. I could see Sark dialing it up all night, and I could see 41-20. And I could see Arizona and Ohio State going at it, and I could see 42-14. And see ya ACC, see you Big 12. Glad you could participate, and it would look like practically a Thursday noon tip-off in the NCAA tournament, where the score's like 41-18 at halftime. Bye. See you. You technically made it. You shouldn't have been here. But that's a very feasible playoff. I don't see any real dark horses there. I don't see any dark horses there. But there's no Ole Miss. There's Ole Miss there in the 7-10 game. Yeah, that's it's not necessarily chalk when it comes to the conference championships, because Ralph is not going. He's going past Florida State and Clemson, which are slight Vegas odds favorites over Miami, and he's going Arizona, which of course Utah is the pretty substantial favorite out of the Big 12, and then it's more Oklahoma State and Kansas State. But if you look at the AP preseason rankings, Utah's somewhere around 13, and then Kansas State and Oklahoma State are 17, 18 in that range, and then Arizona is 20 or 21. So the Big 12 is going to be a whole lot of fun. A lot of fun watching the Big 12 this year. All right. This could be a good time to shut things down. We appreciate you being here at the Voice of College Football. And again, for future reference, we would love to see you for overtime. So if you support the show and love what we do here at the Voice of College Football, we would love to be on for 2, 3, 4 hours, Monday through Friday. But certainly we guarantee the 1 hour, and we appreciate you being here. Remember that the Voice of College Football show, the big college football show, and again, we'll get to the naming convention on Monday. And if you didn't notice, I went with a bit of a different decor here. Tried to go with the blues and the blacks, putting that together. Unfortunately, our LED lights here, that is supposed to be blue. Looks like purple to me, but when I hit purple, it looks like pink. But that's blue, and that's purple. Blue looks purple, and purple looks pink. So we went with the blue, of course, because it looked closer. And I could probably put in, it appears I could be a little bit more nuanced. Let's see, here's that. That's as high as they go. During the daytime, they don't really show up anyway. But we put together our Voice of College Football morning show logo and just tried to give it a different of a little branding look for you. So I was going to unveil this on Monday. Then I thought, let's just throw it out there right now. And we'll get the name down. We will announce that, and we will get the gear to the lucky winner of the naming of the show. Even if the name is not used, it's the winning selection, the winning submission of a show name. And again, Monday through Friday, 10 a.m. Eastern Time, through the national championship game. And we would love to be here throughout the day based on your contributions. So we appreciate you. Our next show is, we've got the Oklahoma live show at 4, and the Clemson live show is at 5:30, and then the USC call-in shows at 10 Eastern. See you at 4 p.
What's up, everybody? Chris here from Chris Gates Fitness and the online fitness training camp. Thanks for letting me pop in for a few seconds to tell you about what we got going on in training camp this month. And there's a lot happening, okay? The August program dropped just a few days ago. Everybody's getting into their August workouts, having a blast. The private group is full of discussion and chatter about people getting started, which I love to see. We're going to be doing weekly football pick'em here at the end of the month. That's when that starts. I'm going to be giving away free supplements to people who win that. I'm giving away a treadmill in September because we're doing a step count challenge as a group. All kinds of fun stuff coming. So I hope to see you there. Voice of College Football has a discount code VOICE. You can still get a discount on your first month if you want to jump in. Would love to see you there. Talk to you in training camp.